Geopolitics is not a game of words. It is a cold, calculated measurement of kinetic potential. Today, the world is staring at a digital clock, and that clock is ticking towards zero on the shores of the Persian Gulf. President Donald Trump's ultimatum to Tehran is not a bluff. It is a strategic pivot. It is the transition from economic pressure to the raw application of high-intensity power. The threat is clear. The complete demolition of Iran's power grid and bridge infrastructure in a matter of hours if the Strait of Hormuz is not fully reopened. This is not about regime change. This is not about boots on the ground or the forever wars of the past. This is about the surgical removal of a nation's ability to function as a modern state. When you strip away the diplomatic rhetoric, you are left with the brutal logic of the hard realist. If the strait does not open, the lights in Iran go out permanently. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's most sensitive jugular vein. 20% of global oil and a third of all liquefied natural gas pass through this narrow bottleneck, some points of which are only 2 miles wide. For decades, Tehran has used the geography of the strait as a strategic shield. They believe that the threat of global economic collapse, a systemic shock to the Western financial markets, would provide them with permanent immunity. They calculated that no American president would risk a $200 barrel of oil. But that calculation ignored the shifting scales of energy independence and the evolution of long-range precision strike capabilities. The geography that once protected Iran has now become its greatest liability. By threatening to close the strait, Iran has justified a massive, preemptive American response. The U.S. Navy and Air Force are no longer preparing for a naval skirmish. They are preparing for a systematic deconstruction of Iran's national spine. Tuesday's deadline represents the end of the intermediary era. For months, messages have traveled through Muscat, Doha, and Zurich. Offers were made, ceasefire proposals were weighed. But the logic of great power realism dictates that a significant response is worthless if it is not a sufficient response. Trump's assessment that Iran's proposal is not good enough is a signal that the United States is no longer interested in a stalemate. A stalemate favors the insurgent. A stalemate favors the proxy. To break the deadlock, Washington is moving the goalposts from the sea to the land. If Iran chokes the strait, the U.S. will choke the nation's lifeblood: electricity, water, and mobility. Without power, a modern military cannot communicate. Without bridges, a Revolutionary Guard cannot maneuver. The U.S. is not fighting for the water, it is fighting for the levers of the state itself. Imagine the first hour after the deadline expires. This is not a slow buildup of forces. This is not a repeat of 1991 or 2003. This is a shock and awe recalibrated for the 21st century, compressed into a single afternoon. From the decks of the carrier strike groups in the Arabian Sea and the silent climate-controlled hangars in Diego Garcia, the machinery of American kinetic dominance begins to hum. Stealth is the primary currency here. B-2 Spirit bombers and F-35C Lightning IIs, invisible to Iran's aging radar networks, are already positioning themselves. They are not carrying dumb bombs. They are carrying the precision-guided scalpels of modern warfare, the Joint Direct Attack munitions, and the AGM-158 JASSM. The target list is not human, it is structural. The massive power plants at Bushehr, Damavand, and Shahid Rajeh are the nodes of Iran's domestic stability. In the logic of hard power, these are no longer civilian assets. They are the batteries of the resistance. As the first wave of hundreds of Tomahawk missiles clears the horizon, the geography of the battlefield expands beyond the coastline. Iran's air defense system, built around the Bavar 373 and the Russian-made S-300, was designed for a different era of warfare. They are prepared for a frontal assault, but they are utterly ill-equipped for a saturated electronic warfare environment. U.S. Navy EA-18G Growlers have already flooded the frequency spectrum from the Gulf of Oman to the Caspian Sea. Iranian radar screens are a blizzard of ghost targets and static. Before a single physical explosion occurs, the Iranian command and control structure, the integrated air defense system, is blinded. This is the first rule of great power competition. The side that controls the electromagnetic spectrum controls the outcome. When the missiles finally impact the transformers, the turbines, and the switching stations, the result is instantaneous. The Iranian interior falls into a strategic darkness. The demolition of the bridges comes next, and this is where the geography of Iran becomes its own enemy. Iran is a fortress nation protected by the Zagros and Alborz mountains. Its military strength relies on the ability to move ballistic missile launchers and rapid reaction forces across a complex, narrow network of highways and mountain passes by targeting the bridges of the Khuzestan province, the heart of Iran's oil production, and the arteries leading to the capital, Tehran, the US, is effectively paralyzing the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. You do not need to destroy an army in the field if you can ensure that the army cannot reach the field. This is the ultimate expression of logistics-based warfare. A tank without a bridge is just a stationary target. A missile launcher trapped on a disconnected highway is a wasted asset. In 3 hours, the strategic depth of Iran is reduced to a series of isolated, uncoordinated islands. The reaction from Tehran will be desperate, but it will be constrained by the cold reality of the map. The hardline elements in the IRGC will demand a massive missile barrage against U.S. bases in Qatar, Bahrain, and the Emirates. They will attempt to fire the very Shabab and Fateh missiles they have spent 30 years stockpiling in missile cities underground. But here, the balance of power remains skewed. The U.S. Integrated Air and Missile Defense Shield, comprising Patriot PAC-3, THAAD, and Aegis-equipped destroyers, is at its highest state of readiness in history. For every Iranian missile that makes it through, the American response will be a 10-fold escalation against Iran's remaining oil terminals at Karg Island. This is the logic of the escalation ladder. To win, you must be able to climb higher and stay there longer than your opponent. The United States has the industrial depth and the logistical tail to replace interceptors. Iran does not have the industrial depth to replace its national power grid. By the 6-hour mark, the regional landscape has shifted fundamentally. The proxies in Lebanon, Yemen, and Iraq find themselves suddenly orphaned. Their patron is no longer a regional hegemon projecting power through the land bridge to the Mediterranean. It is a nation struggling to keep its hospitals running, its water pumps turning, and its internal security forces fed. This is the byproduct of a structural strike. It breaks the link between the center and the periphery. The axis of resistance relies on the flow of money, intelligence, and materiel from Tehran. When the bridges are gone, the servers are dark, and the central government is deaf and blind, the proxies are forced to look for their own survival. The deterrence that Iran worked 30 years to build the ring of fire around its rivals evaporates in a single afternoon of precision strikes. The great powers Russia and China will watch this from the sidelines with cold, realistic calculation. They will issue stern condemnations in the UN Security Council, but they will not intervene. Realism dictates that no power will risk a direct, high-intensity confrontation with a fully mobilized United States over a regional power that has lost its strategic utility. Beijing, in particular, will recognize that its energy security is more important than its partnership with a paralyzed Tehran. If the U.S. demonstrates it can open the strait by force and deconstruct Iran's economy in a day, China will adapt to the new reality. They respect the winner of the kinetic argument. In the world of great power realism, there are no permanent friends, only permanent interests. And China's interest is the survival of the global trade system, regardless of who controls the shores of the Gulf. As the smoke clears, the strategic turning point becomes visible. The myth of the asymmetric stalemate is dead. For years, analysts argued that the U.S. was deterred by Iran's ability to cause regional chaos. But Trump's ultimatum proves that asymmetry only works if the superior power is unwilling to use its full weight. By targeting the civilian military dual-use infrastructure, the very things that allow a regime to maintain domestic order, the U.S. has bypassed the tactical quagmire of the strait and struck at the heart of the Iranian state's survival. The lesson to other regional powers is chilling. Your geography cannot protect you if your infrastructure is vulnerable to 5,000-pound kinetic penetrators and high-altitude stealth platforms. The cost of closing the strait has been made higher than the value of the regime itself. The consequences for the global balance of power are profound. We are witnessing the return of the big stick policy, backed by the reality of U.S. energy dominance and technological overmatch. The United States is no longer a weary titan retreating from the Middle East. It is a rejuvenated power demonstrating that it can reset a regional order without the need for a decade-long occupation or a single soldier crossing the border. This is warfare stripped of its idealistic liberal pretenses. There is no talk of democracy, human rights, or nation building. There is only the clinical, efficient destruction of the enemy's capacity to resist. It is a message directed not just at Tehran, but to every challenger in the South China Sea, the Eastern Mediterranean, and the Baltic. The U.S. has the range, the precision, the logistics, and the will to dismantle a nation's functionality in a single work shift. The logistics of this hours-long war are what truly define the new era. The U.S. can sustain this level of bombardment for weeks if necessary, rotating carrier groups and long-range bomber wings with the precision of a factory floor. Iran, conversely, cannot repair a pulverized turbine or a collapsed mountain bridge while its skies are owned by F-22s. This is the definition of asymmetric vulnerability. When the primary power can destroy faster than the secondary power can rebuild, the war is already over. The deadline isn't just about a treaty. It's about the survival of Iran as a 21st century entity. In the end, the logic of this conflict is found in the ruins of the transformers and the twisted steel of the bridges. Iran's leadership now faces an impossible choice. They can maintain their pride, keep the strait closed, and watch their country revert to a pre-industrial state, or they can accept the American terms and survive to see another day. This is the essence of coercive diplomacy. It is the use of the threat of total structural ruin to force a political concession. Trump has bet that the Iranian leadership values their grip on power more than their regional ambitions. In the cold light of a Wednesday morning, when the sirens are silent because there is no electricity to power them, the world will know if he was right. The question for the next decade is not whether the Strait of Hormuz will stay open. The question is, who will ever dare to threaten it again? The precedent has been set. The Hormuz deal is not a treaty reached between equals. It is a surrender to the reality of American kinetic overmatch. The geopolitical map has been redrawn not by diplomats at a mahogany table, but by mission planners at Central Command. In the realm of the great powers, peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of an overwhelming, terrifying deterrent. After this Tuesday, that deterrent is no longer a theory. It is a scorched reality. The lights are out, the bridges are down, and the global balance of power has been restored through the uncompromising, logic-driven application of hard, cold steel. The era of the stalemate is over. The era of the ultimatum has begun.